Hello and welcome to ECON Week 5. I had to move my background today because the little desk computer webcam that I use is not working today, so I've given you the little professional set that I use for my news broadcast. You can see my lovely Virginia Tech diploma here, all the Associated Press awards, and of course the plaque honoring the 1976 Oakland Raiders, still the greatest NFL team of all time, if you ask me. But that's not the issue this week, is it? We're going to be talking this week, the unit is called Choices. Now, you are underage, so I can't tell you to take a shot every time you hear the word choices, but eat a Hershey's Kiss every time you hear choices today, and you'll be nice, fat, and happy at the end of this. Choices is what fuels an economy. Choices is one of the things that lets us know if our economy is working. If we have an abundance of choices to make, then it's probably working okay. If we have fewer choices to make, then we probably have some work to do. I'm going to go ahead and let you know that we're going to have some terms this week that are going to seem a little bit overwhelming at times. I'm going to be shooting them off kind of rapid fire. I'll try to make some visual aids to help you. There'll be some charts. The charts I'm not necessarily interested in you memorizing. I just want to kind of show them off to let you know how complicated this can be. As I mentioned earlier, the economy is an issue that occupies the thoughts of a whole lot of people. They put a whole lot of work into this, and they still sometimes get it wrong. Again, just kind of bear with me on the definitions. They are crucial, and this will be, unlike some of our past lessons, kind of term heavy. But we'll try to explain it, and of course we'll be discussing the terms in class on Monday. To do a little religious tie-in here, we worship a God that gives us lots of alternatives. The biggest alternative is the choice to love God. God knows that love, if it's compulsory, is not really love. So from the get-go, as Christians, we are offered the biggest choice of all, the choice of whether to follow God and let God into our hearts. It extends to economics in that we get to make lots of choices about our money as well. And of course, with choices come two things: responsibility and consequences. You have the responsibility to make good choices. That means you study, you listen, you collate information, you pay attention. Consequences are going to happen no matter what choice you make. Always. Most of the time they're inconsequential, very minor. Sometimes they have major consequences. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're a mixture, sometimes they're indifferent. But there will always be consequences to every action. The idea is that we educate ourselves enough to where we are making educated choices. We're not tossing a coin or shooting blindly in the dark. Bad choices in economics might result in you having lots of debt. That is to say, you borrowed more than you could pay back. You tried to buy too big a house, too fast a car. That's a negative consequence of a bad economic choice. And we see those all the time, unfortunately. Sometimes the choices you make have unintended consequences. Now, we've talked about unintended consequences a lot, generally when talking about government tax policies and the unintended consequence that almost always produces. Again, to kind of underscore all this, making choices is a big part of life. It is the lifeblood of economies. All of our choices are made with the assumption that our resources are limited. Even if you're Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, you have limited resources. You do not have access to the entire world supply of wealth, of energy, of time. So we all make our choices with that knowledge in mind. Some of our resources are more limited than others, and some of us have many fewer financial resources, to be sure, but we're all limited in some way, and we all make choices based upon that knowledge, that there's a limit. The three basic economic issues that are at the heart of every choice, we'll examine these very quickly, but just know this: the choices on what goods and services are produced and in what quantities, the manner in which these goods are produced, and the manner in which they are distributed. Those are the three basic issues that drive choices, whether it's an individual choice or a business choice or a government choice. Those three factors all have a say in what choice you make. So it behooves us to have knowledge about how the economy works, and collectively we do. The sum of economic knowledge is possessed by all 7 billion people on the planet. Unfortunately, no one person knows it all. It's impossible. There are so many moving dynamics, and again, money is active. It moves. It jumps up and down. You have to corral it. That is true with economic decisions. Very complicated sometimes. We worship a God of abundance, but we make our economic choices out of the assumption of scarcity sometimes. Now, that is focusing on the negative, and you could make the argument that since we worship a God of abundance, that we should assume things will always be 100% perfect. But we're not in heaven. We're on earth, and earth is broken, and there are going to be bad consequences to things. We do generally believe that there is enough to go around, that we do have enough resources on this planet to make sure everyone has a reasonably safe and healthy life, or at least the potential for that. There is a tendency to think of wealth in the abstract as this finite thing that is, your slice of the pie is that big and that's going to be it. If you give up that, then someone's going to get it as a zero-sum game. A lot of people don't have the knowledge that wealth can be created, that pie can be expanded, and it is. Every time, I'm speaking to you on a device that did not exist 20 years ago, a device that 30 years ago could not even be imagined, really. How much more wealth has been created through iPads, through your iPhones, through Androids, through personal computers? That's wealth being created. That wealth did not exist 2 generations ago. The pie is expanded when the economy is working well. It is not a zero-sum game. It is not finite. It is infinite. We still make irresponsible decisions. We mentioned debt being the most conspicuous and frequent of the evidence of bad economic decisions. Individually, and at the business level, and at the government level, we conduct all the time something called a cost-benefit analysis. It involves basically making a list of the pros and cons of taking a particular step. How much will it cost? How much will I get in return? And you determine quite simply if the benefits outweigh the costs. Most of the time we do this unconsciously every day. Is it worth the extra hour sleep I'll get by being late for work? Well, you'll feel more refreshed as you hear the boss say you're fired. Consequences again. We go back to that. Consequences are factored into a cost-benefit analysis. We do it all the time. We do it when we decide if we're going to eat a candy bar. We know that we'll get about a couple of minutes of joy and satisfaction and a little small energy boost, but we know that there are consequences to eating candy bars, particularly in the long term. We know those consequences, and we weigh them in a cost-benefit analysis. We do a CBA when we buy a coat. Over here is a $50 coat. Over here is a $20 coat. Both of them will keep us just as warm. This one over here looks cool, and it's got a cool designer logo on it too. So if I spend $50 on this, I'm not only going to be warm, but I'll look cool. Over here, $20, well, I don't care about looking cool. I just want to be warm. You're making a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth the extra $30 to look cool? To some people it is, to some it is not. To me it is not. Look at how I'm dressed now. This is tuxedo for me. That's all we're going to be, all of these appeals like that are kind of lost on me. But again, we are conducting, in our brains, a cost-benefit analysis. We do it at the business level too. If you make 5,000 widgets, and you want to decide if that's worth it. Is it worth it to make those 5,000 widgets? Can we make this and get more than that cost back. That's a cost-benefit analysis. Government does that too. The difference with government is if they get a cost-benefit analysis wrong, they don't pay the price that we do. They don't pay the price that businesses do. Businesses, if they fail to do a cost-benefit analysis or do a poor one, they suffer. Government can suffer, but it's not nearly as bad, and sometimes, quite frankly, they don't suffer at all. The concept of margins is a little bit different. Yes, we use margins in a cost-benefit analysis. Margin is a small step that can make a big difference. Margins is usually where our choices are made. Usually our choices are not yes or no, do or not do. It's how much. That company we talked about that produces 5,000 widgets, they do a cost-benefit analysis on whether they can do that with all the cost and make enough money in return to justify the cost. Okay, let's say they do that. Now they're thinking about making more, a marginal choice. What if we produce 10,000 widgets? What's the extra cost on making those extra 5,000 widgets? And will the extra benefit outweigh that extra cost? And then when we add it all up for all 10,000, is it going to matter? Most of the decisions we make are not yes or no. They're along margins. Do I do more or less? More or fewer? Those are usually the decisions that we make. One of the things economists like to talk about is the marginal propensity to consume. That tries to study what people will do with money that they're not spending. That is to say, extra income, disposable income, what you got left over after all the bills are paid and the shoes are bought and the groceries are in the fridge. Will you spend it or save it? That's a choice. That determination is usually done after what? A cost-benefit analysis. Different economic conditions will lead to different conclusions. In some climates, about 80% of the people are going to save anything extra they have. In some climates, about 80% of the people are going to spend. Now, again, it's usually in margins. You're not going to spend it all. You're not going to save it all. But the proportion that you spend versus you save, that's something that economists try to figure out all the time. And sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong. It's difficult. There are no guarantees when you are studying economics. Let's look at the various choices that we make, this time at the producer business level. We'll talk about individual choices in a minute, but as businesses, these choices that businesses make, small, medium, large, gargantuan, they're all choices. Just to take a step back, we divide our economy into two broad categories, goods and services. Goods are things you can see, touch, smell, taste, and feel, tangible stuff. Services are things that you cannot tangibly see. Doing a radio show is intangible. I mean, yeah, you can hear it, but the benefit is sometimes intangible. Healthcare is intangible. It's a service. It's not a good. It can be picked up and transferred. It's a service. People who operate businesses decide, first off, what goods and services they want to offer, and decisions about production can take a whole lot of forms. Farmer can decide what crops to plant, how much, is it worth it, cost-benefit analysis. Will they make more money if they produce just a little bit more corn? Automakers have to decide what kind of autos they will make, how much they're going to pay the workers. Is it worth it to add lines? Is it worth it to make more than we first anticipated? Retailers have to decide if they're going to offer their products in a physical store, mobile stand, on the internet, mixture of both. Again, choices. This time we're examining them at the business level. Production resources are the elements that producers use to create these goods and services. Material resources, human resources, raw capital, which can be more than just money. Material resources are things that you find in nature usually. These are the raw materials. We're talking about rocks, maple syrup, petroleum, mineral deposits, many other things that constitute raw resources. People who operate businesses have to determine the cost of these material goods and the availability of these production goods. Human resources are another commodity that businesses have to weigh. Quite often, in most businesses, the human resources, the labor, is the most expensive of the resources. Makes sense. Capital is usually refers to money, but does not always have to do. When we hear somebody now has the capital to start their own business, that means more than just money. It means the material used to produce goods. Again, money is no more valuable than its purchasing power. But again, when we look at that, that's usually what we're talking about. They decide what materials they want to use, how much they're willing to pay workers, how many workers they need, and all kinds of other choices. Business owners, again, they're also consumers just like we are because they have to purchase these raw materials. They have to essentially purchase the human capital and whatnot. They need land. In some cases, they need buildings. They need infrastructure, water and sewer. Again, much like us, they are also consumers. One aspect of production is what's called the production possibilities curve. And that is basically an example of how much do I produce. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. As a matter of fact, that's all the time we're going to spend on that. Have I got too much headway here? Hang on, I'm going to try something here. This is going to be live because I can't stop this darn thing. We're going to try something else here. We're going to try a new thing. Just bear with me for a second. All right, that's a little bit better. I'm occupying a little bit more of the screen here with this. Aren't you lucky to be seeing live editing like this? Yeah, that's a little bit better. I'm going to do that. One of the big factors is something called opportunity cost. It's defined as the greatest benefit that a producer gives up when they make a choice. Again, every choice you make has a consequence, good, bad, or indifferent. If you decide to spend 2 hours with your best friend this afternoon, that's a choice. But that's 2 hours you could be doing homework, 2 hours you could be mowing the grass, 2 hours you could be doing. There's a trade-off. Opportunity cost is the greatest benefit that you give up by taking a particular action. Let's say you sell lemonade for 1 hour and make $50. That hour could have been spent mowing the grass for somebody, making $30, or doing chores for somebody, making $20, or doing something else and making $15. The opportunity cost looks at that $50 and the most lucrative of the items that you did not do. In this case, the $30 for cutting the lawn. So your opportunity cost there is, it's not $70, it's $20. 50 versus 30. Opportunity cost is the greatest benefit that you give up by taking an action because you cannot, in many cases, do two things at once. Businesses naturally want to make their opportunity costs as small as possible. Still, another economic impact is called a trade-off, and you will be hearing that a lot. Trade-off, crucial part of choices. It's what you have to accept when you make a decision. Sometimes these are consequences. Sometimes they're unintended consequences. They are trade-off. If you decide to run your business producing these plastic things by importing oil from Saudi Arabia as opposed to getting it domestically, then you are going to be dependent on another country for your raw materials. That's a trade-off. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. If a people in a society decide to minimize environmental restrictions on producers, they are going to get the upside of having less costly items, but the trade-off is the possibility of bad environmental decisions. Sometimes they're unintended, sometimes we know what they are. Trade-off. Are you willing to sacrifice this to get this? We make those kind of decisions every day. It's part of our personal cost-benefit analysis. A couple of other terms to remember here. Economy of scale takes the average cost per item and determines why it decreases as the number of units increase. This is the idea of why it's cheaper to buy a gallon of milk than it is to buy 2 half gallons. Why it's cheaper. Here's something I'll say. The 12-pack is cheaper than the 2 6-packs. because, again, that's economy of scale. That's an important one to remember. Production is cheaper per item if the goods are made in a single factory than if there are multiple factories. It takes more labor to put the 2 six-packs together as opposed to one. Again, you're getting the idea. Along with economy of scale comes the concept of economy of scope. The average total cost of production decreases as it produces more related products. Example here, it's cheaper for one factory to make the shampoo and the conditioner than it is to build a factory to produce just the shampoo and a factory to produce just the conditioner. That's doubling resources. That's multitasking. Multitasking is economy of scope. Some companies have found that it's more efficient to own raw materials. Others find it cheaper to buy them. Let's look at these same choices, but at the individual level. They are consequential, too, to us as individuals. I want to make sure I'm still recording here. Personal economic consumption and decisions make up roughly, right now, about 70% of the economy. So this matters. What you choose matters. Now, the fundamental choice we make is whether to buy. Yes or no? Are you going to buy that or not? Are you going to buy something or not? The next most fundamental choice is what you're going to buy. That factor between saving and spending also in there. That is why we are flooded with things that will try to influence our choices. Lots of things that are used to try to influence that decision on, number one, whether to buy, and number two, what to buy. Incentives. Economists believe people act out of self-interest. We do. Much like that famous Adam Smith quote, it's not to the benevolence of the butcher or the baker or the brewer that we owe our dinner. It is to their regards to their own self-interest. They are interested in making a living. The byproduct of that is you can trade money for goods and services. People will act out of self-interest, though sometimes there are those who genuinely will sacrifice things for others, and that's a great thing. As Christians, we are taught that is valuable. An incentive is a benefit that motivates a certain action. The most common incentive is a reduction of price. If you're looking at 2 jars of peanut butter, you think they both taste more or less the same, one of them's about 40% cheaper than the others, you're going to go over here. That's an incentive. You are being incentivized to purchase that cheaper peanut butter, which is same quality, in your opinion. Another incentive might be a rebate, a subsidy of some sort, where you mail something back in and get dollars back. That's another incentive that can basically works the same as a reduction in price. Consumers are responding, some cases, to just the mere incentive of conspicuous consumption. There are people who will pay more for something just for the look, the prestige. Remember the coat we were talking about over here? It must be nice. It's $50. That $20 coat cannot possibly be as cool as the $50. That's bunk. Again, I remember as a kid, we used to, this was right before Nike, I'm giving my age away here, Converse was the big thing then, and if you had any other shoe other than a Converse, then they called it a foot burner. Well, that foot burner cost half of what Converse cost, and even I realized at age 10, this is better. This is going to last me just as long as the Converse, then I can have extra money to buy baseball cards. That's a choice. That's my priority. That's one of the thousands and thousands of choices we make as individual consumers. But yes, they are. Sometimes you pay for the distinctive little Nike logo up here. You're going to pay more for that than you will for the generic shirt, even though the generic shirt's probably just as good. People also respond to disincentives. The most common disincentive is a tax, which makes a product or service more expensive. Regardless of what you feel about smoking, smoking is something that has been taxed to a great degree because we're trying to, the government that is, and as a society, we're trying to influence buyer behavior. Problem with that is, what's our favorite phrase? Unintended consequences. Remember the yacht example we talked about when we were talking about government and taxation? Yeah, sometimes you tax at a level to where everybody loses. You don't get the revenue as a government that you expect, and the people that were going to benefit from that extra revenue ain't getting it. Plus, the people whose industry was impacted by your tax, they're all of a sudden now needing some help from you. Unintended consequences. Disincentives can have those, but also the demand might exceed the company's abilities to supply the goods. Again, there's that reverse unintended consequence. We offered so much of an incentive that now people are demanding it more than we can produce it. That's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. We look at the concept of substitute goods. Remember the coat we were talking about, the $50 one versus the $20 one? A substitute good is an alternative to the item. Most of the time it's that. A lot of times in a grocery store, it's the generic brand of peanut butter as opposed to Jif. Now, there may be some quality difference between the two, but the reason there's a sizable market for non-brand name items is that quite often that difference in quality is negligible. There have been times where I have saved, $40, $50, $60 at a grocery store simply because when given that choice and where I think that quality is not an option, I'll go for the generic brand. Now, there are some things I will not go generic on, but many things I will. Choices. Cost-benefit analysis. We do it all the time. In high school, if you didn't have the little Levi's thing on your pants, then your pants were, gauche. Yeah, you're bad. Well, instead of spending $50 on a pair of jeans, I bought one at the Wrangler store for $12, just as good. Again, the appeal of looking cool was never much for me. Consumer choice theory examines how consumers decide to buy what they do. In economics, we talk about the utility of a decision. That doesn't mean its usefulness, but that's customer satisfaction. Customers want satisfaction, and they will create, and that will be a very, very big factor in their choices. The fact at what point they are satisfied with the product. One factor is what the consumer wants. Another factor is what the consumer can afford. Again, $50 coat versus $20. The third factor is, of course, the ultimate choice that the consumer makes, trying to figure out the breaking point. Let's go back to our coat example. What if this coat over here, the $20 coat, cost $35? We're starting to get a little closer. What if it costs $50? Well, if it's $50, then all things being equal, I'll take the snazzy one over here that makes me look cool and saves us the same. There's a point. There's a point at which there's an equilibrium here where the cool coat is just as valuable or more valuable than the cheap one, if it's not cheaper anymore. How changes in price and changes in consumer income affect the choices that consumers make is the study of a lot of economic theory. One principle is called diminishing marginal utility. Remember that phrase. That's one of the terms I want you to remember. Diminishing marginal utility. That's the potato chip example. You can't have just one, but at some point you've had enough potato chips. The point at which you desire no more potato chips is the diminishing marginal utility point. The more chips you have after that, the less satisfying they are. That point at which the chips are no longer satisfying, that's the diminishing marginal utility point. And for a business, that means a lot. Lay's, in terms of potato chips, they have smaller sizes based upon studies after studies that show this is the optimal size for a personal bag of chips. They also offer bigger sizes for instances where their market is people who want a few more chips to make them happy. Sodas. For a long time, 12 ounces was the standard. Then 16 became the standard. Then they snuck it up to 20. Now you can get 24 ounces. We're getting bigger, so we want more stuff. Again, that point at which it's no longer pleasurable, no longer desirable to consume a product, that is the, what's the word again? diminishing marginal utility, and businesses have to consider that. Economists refer also to these conditions as utility maximizing. Most often this refers to government policies again. The idea is that $1 of benefits to the poor will increase their utility satisfaction more than $1 will in taxes to the rich. Again, that's more of a public thing. We're going to look at one of the choices you guys are going to have to make here very shortly is your college choice. And you will be making a consumer choice. You are consuming this product. This is part of the economy. You will have to decide if the money it costs for you to go to college will be worth the increase in salary that it would be to not go to college. There's that opportunity cost again. Again, I could be doing something over these 4 years apart from going to college. How much would that cost me? How much will I earn during these 4 years that I could not probably earn in college? You have to weigh that into your decision. You also have to think 50, 60 years in the workforce potentially. How much am I going to earn with a college degree as opposed to not having a college degree? A lot of these are estimates. We don't really know. You don't know if that job or that field you're studying in college is going to be viable in 10 years, 30, 60. A lot of it's guesswork, but you still do it. That's still part of your cost-benefit analysis of deciding, number one, do I want to go to college? Number two, what kind of college? Which one? Number three, what am I going to study in that college? You're making economic decisions the whole time. And again, unintended consequences and bad decisions, they happen there too. A lot of debt, studied in the field that there was no chance in Hades I was going to get a job. Those are consequences to your decisions. We also have trade-offs in that decision. You are accepting less income for the next 4 or 5 years in exchange for the possibility of more. That's a trade-off. We talked about those earlier too. Now we're going to look at the third entity that has choices, the government. Like I've said earlier, and I don't think it's any secret how I think, I am less trustful of the government simply because they usually pay little or no price for being wrong. They have less incentive, there's that word again, to be right all the time. Government and society as institutions really do little. It is ultimately the people, the businesses that make the choices, but government can have a ton of influence on those. Again, remember our continuum of economies. Capitalist and command. Free market, no free market. Cool, uncool. I'm sorry, you didn't hear that. But yeah, it is. On this continuum, in a command economy, government officials are the ones that make a lot of the decisions for you. All of these pesky choices we're talking about, and what do I do here? What college do I go to? What do I study? That's chosen for you. That may appeal to you, but that's not a good thing. It is not a good thing at all. Yeah, sometimes these choices are vexing, maddening, but they're worth it. It's worth it to be able to choose for yourself and to accept the consequences and the responsibilities. Why? You own it. It's yours. It does not belong to anybody else. There is a value on that you cannot replace. It's yours. Anyway, sometimes on these spectrums that we're talking about here, the choices become efficiency versus equity. Efficiency is usually prized in a capitalistic economy, not surprisingly, because in a capitalistic economy, efficiency increases your chance of success. The idea that you are producing the best quality product possible at the lowest possible price possible, that is how a capitalistic economy is made efficient. Historically, market economies are much better than the command economies at creating these efficiencies. It's not even close. It's not a fair fight. In terms of equity, economic equity is the goal of having people in a society to a certain degree share goods as equally as possible. In a command economy over here, that is prized. It just struck me. I always use capitalist over here, command over here, because to me, right versus left. You're looking at this as the complete opposite now. I'm sorry. Get used to it. The idea is that in a command economy, they believe it's better to have a little bit less, but for everyone to be more equal. Of course, they don't mean themselves. No, the government leaders are not part of this great equality here. They mean you. They mean me. In a market economy, people are going to have a wide range of income sometimes, and people are going to have a lot of resources and thin resources sometimes, depending upon how things go. The coolest thing is does not have to be a permanent state. You do have opportunities to improve yourself, your standing in a market economy that simply does not exist over here in a command economy. If it did exist, it would not be a command economy. Again, that idea between the most efficient economy and the most equitable economy, those are not necessarily diametrically opposed, but they do somewhat compete. Those two ideas do somewhat compete. Here's our old friend, that choice of freedom or security. We talked about how that influences people's political beliefs, that idea of dangerous freedom versus safe security. A lot of people will choose the secure blanket as opposed to the dangerous acquisition of heat, if that's a good example. Freedom, allowing people to do what they want to for the most part in an economy, is a market economy principle. That is the fuel of a market economy. Again, we've been talking for the last 35 minutes about choices. That's freedom. The more choices you have, the freer you are. The fewer choices you have, the less free you are. Command economy does not highly value this principle. They want what people produce and who works where are decisions left to the government, the central planners. They believe they are the ones that can do that the most efficiently because they're going to do it the most equitably. They're not going to be equal to you, but that's another point. A command economy, meantime, places a high value on economic security. You're never going to have to worry about losing a lot of money because you're going to be secure. Now, you don't have as much to lose. That's a point, too. But it's safe. Safety. Market economy, it's possible that some people are going to slip through the cracks here. There is less security in a market economy. But what's our old friend Ben Franklin say? Those who are willing to sacrifice freedom to get security will get neither and deserve neither. Because, again, the whole thing is, if you want to have economic security, there are ways you can get that while allowing me economic freedom. If you receive total economic freedom, then I have to participate too. If you want total economic security, I should say, then I have to participate too, and I cannot be free. I don't have alternatives under your system like you have under mine. It's manners, basic manners. I would never, if someone wanted to be economically secure, I would never deign to tell them that they cannot. And I expect the same courtesy in return. The choice of growth or stability. Growth, market economies favor that. Market economies are built on the idea of growth. Remember, that pie getting bigger, that is a market economy principle. By contrast, growth in a command economy is going to be reactive to whatever the government deems is necessary. The market economy is driven by the market. Supply and demand are old friends there. This over here is determined by politics. They might spend a lot on military. They might spend a lot on heavy industry, depending upon what the central planners want, not depending upon what we want. Market economies, we talked about this last week. They are inevitable boom and bust cycles. That is the way they work. That is fundamental. The idea is to have the booms go higher and longer and the bust to be shorter and quicker. And when the economy is working well, it will do that. There will be far more booms than busts, but there will be some volatility. Command economies have fewer of these dramatic swings, again, because the economy is less productive to begin with. If you don't have much, you don't have much to lose. Market economies enable growth by risking a little bit of that stability. The idea, again, you can't make an omelet without breaking an egg or two. the decisions that people in government make sometimes have commonality to the decisions we make as individuals and businesses make as businesses. Areas of expenditure in a government's budget, much like it is in a family's budget, are prioritized. A lot of that is based upon which political party is in power, but there are priorities. During the Cold War, military spending was a priority. During the late 60s, early 70s, greater amounts of money were spent on energy and on social net programs. Government economy or economic decisions are also, much like we are, influenced by incentives. The government, though, is the one that gives the incentives usually to us. They can influence the actions of producers and consumers. They can entice businesses to open in certain localities by not charging them business or corporate taxes or by building them a new road. They can offer those incentives. People in government, they're good at this, offer limitations as well. Onerous regulations are the most obvious ones. Again, environmental regulations limit what a business can do. We have decided as a society that some are essential, that basic regulations will give us adequate or environmental protections without interfering with that business's ability to create jobs, create wealth for them and for others. Tariffs and embargoes on foreign-made imported goods can limit the choices that producers and consumers have. That's a limitation that the government can place. Government also has the power of allocation, where the resources go. When we talk about government redistributing wealth, that is a form of allocation. The 1930s, the government, collectively through political persuasion, decided to allocate more of the nation's wealth to the elderly through the Social Security program. A generation later, they did it again, this time forming Medicare and Medicaid. This is one aspect of government, as we have explained, that has grown exponentially over the years. The allocation or reallocation of resources. That's a power government has, obviously, that we don't. Another term here for you to consider, something called public choice theory. It's the field of study that applies principles of economics to political science, political issues. The idea is that voters are typically going to act on the basis of their self-interest, and they're going to elect government officials that share their self-interest. It's common sense, but now we have a name for that common sense. Public choice theory. Government officials, of course, as we well know, do not always act benevolently. They also don't act always on what we call the greater good. When the party in power convinces enough people to throw the rascals out to replace them with us, they find that the new party will sometimes behave basically like the old party does. That's why it's problematic in giving government that authority. They pay no price for being wrong. Never let someone have power over your life who pays no price for being wrong. Sometimes you can't avoid it. In that case, give them as little authority as you can get away with. In this unit, we've discussed the process of making choices, the economic choices in particular that we make as consumers, as producers, and as the government. Choice is a central aspect of economics. In what we call a free market, choice is essential. Again, if you don't have any choices, it's not a free market, is it? The choices, the cost-benefit analysis, the trade-offs, all of that is crucial. It is the soil of economic growth. And we'll talk more about this on Monday, because when we talk about choices in a truly free economy, those choices are limitless. We'll see you on Monday. Stay warm.